delighted to say that our guest today is Tony Saunders. Tony is one of the world's greatest bass players, an incredible musician, and with a great life story. And not the least, born into music royalty. He's the son of Merl Saunders. Tony, welcome to our podcast.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. Uh, there's so much to talk about. I'm not sure where to start, but I know you're currently on the jazz charts. Uh, let's start with what you're doing currently. Tell us about your hit records.
Well, currently, I'm signed to Baja TSR Records, and I have a smooth jazz record out. And in 2022, it was the third most played CD, and I've been able to translate those laurels into a lot of jobs. And this is my fifth record of smooth jazz, so I've been doing it for about 11 years. And between that and playing the music of my dad and Jerry Garcia, it lets me have a good career. And I've been able to bounce back from the COVID shutdown days.
Yeah, well, definitely stretch you in both directions with smooth jazz and the Grateful Dead catalog.
Yeah, there's not many people that say they can play trucking and smooth jazz stuff, but I can. It's pretty cool. Well, I grew up, I was born in the city, and I grew up on Page and Ashbury, so I saw that whole evolution of turning that quiet Catholic neighborhood into the Haight-Ashbury as we know it today, which is full of hippies and a lot of other stuff. But all of those groups came there. It's ironic. All of those groups, the Airplane, the Grateful Dead, a lot of solo acts, and what's really funny is that when I was in high school, I used to rehearse at the Airplane House because I met Jack Cassidy. And so I used to rehearse my high school band there. And then, of course, my dad in '69 started playing with Jerry Garcia. So my grandmother, before '69, my grandmother, they always played in the music in the park in the Panhandle, right? All those groups, right? And my grandmother would call the police and say, "Hey, can you get them to stop the music after 8 o'clock? My kids got to go to sleep." And then in 1969, those groups, well, Jerry Garcia, who was one of those groups, was in my garage rehearsing, and she's feeding them chicken. So, times changed, and it was great to grow up in the 60s. And ironically, a lot of those groups that played in the Panhandle, I got to play with. I mean, I got to play with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I got to play with the Grateful Dead. I got to play with the guys in Hot Tuna, with Yorma, and when Jack would get mad at Yorma, I got to play. When Yorma would get mad at Jack, I got to play with Hot Tuna because for a while, my friend Bob Steeler was the drummer, and he played with my dad also, but he also played with Hot Tuna. And so I would just go hang out with them, and Yorma liked me a lot, and Yorma still comes to my gigs sometimes because he liked to watch my development. So when him and Jack were having a little skirmish, I get to be over there at Yorma's house playing Hot Tuna music. It was pretty cool. So wow. And then I've also played, with a lot of those groups that I heard when I was a kid. I even got to play. I didn't get to play with Jimi Hendrix, but I played with everybody else that was in his bands: Buddy Miles, Noel Redding, Mitch Mitchell, Noel Redding, Buddy Miles. I just haven't played with Billy Cox. Actually, Billy Cox gave me a couple of gigs that he didn't want to do. That was in fact, Bob, it was a guy that used to live by you, Randy Hansen. Oh, yeah. I played with his band of Gypsies. We did the United States, and it was pretty cool. And I got to play with Buddy Miles, which was pretty cool.
Wow, I love Buddy.
Buddy was very cool. And Randy, for those who don't know, was sort of considered the foremost Jimi Hendrix impersonator or interpreter. So that's all very cool. Very cool.
It was great to watch. He would be looking at the screens of Jimi Hendrix going, "That's me." He would always crack me up, And I spent a lot of time around Mitch Mitchell. Oh my God, Mitch Mitchell was pretty crazy. But he's a good drummer, and we had a lot of fun.
So let me ask you a politic question. You played with Yorma, you played with, and we're getting a little bit of echo there. I'm not sure where, but who's your favorite guitar player that you've played with?
Um, I played with so many. Of course, Jerry Garcia is up there at the top. And man, but I played with Eric Clapton. I played with Yorma's great. I play with David Crosby, and the stuff that they do with that group is great. A guy that plays in that with Crosby before he passed away, Jeff Pevar. He's like one of my favorite guitar players. There's so many good guitar players, just like there's so many great bass players. But those would probably be some of my favorites that I played with. And of course, I like George Benson, and I like John McLaughlin, and I've just seen some incredibly studious guitar players that were like off the charts, and they're all like super famous. And I've been lucky enough to play with a few of them, and it's really turned my head and made me practice more.
Yeah.
John McLaughlin is kind of like at the heights of the whole jazz experience. I've seen him multiple times playing with Carlos. He's from another planet. He's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's incredible. I know the bass player that played, one of my favorite bass players. I can see his face, but I can't say his name right now. But he played in Mahavishnu with when he was like a teenager. Ralph Armstrong was his name. Ralph Armstrong played in Mahavishnu with Narada Michael Walden, and Ralph is like, he's one of my favorite bass players. He's really cool, really great. I mean, and just really nice, and he's a nice guy. But at 18 years old, he's playing like in Mahavishnu, and that's not simple music. I think that I've gotten to play and be around some of the best people because, like George Benson, I remember when he came to my house, because when I was born, it was kind of like towards the end of segregation in the clubs, right? So in the 50s, so I got to be in Peggy Sue Got Married because they wanted to use the group Pride and Joy, which had both races in it. But back when that movie, the time period, there wasn't groups like that. You know what I mean? So I got to be in the movie because of that. They wanted to use Pride and Joy, but they couldn't because it didn't fit the time period. And so all the black musicians, when they were coming to San Francisco, they all stayed at the same hotel. They all played the same clubs, and they all played at my dad's jam session, which was every Sunday morning at Jackson Sutter Street. And so I got to meet Miles, George Benson, Herbie, Hancock, all these guys. They would come to my dad's house and hang out with my dad because he was holding down the jam session, and he was one of the great musicians of San Francisco. So it was kind of my life was I was born into celebrityism, and my dad, getting to be around. Some people don't want to do a job like their dad, but I always wanted to be a musician, because I've been around my dad. I'll be around these guys. I didn't know they were famous. It was just Jerry. Mike was just Mike Bloomfield. Mike Bloomfield was just Mike, Uncle Mike. And Jerry was Uncle Jerry. We didn't know. I didn't realize that these guys were the epitome of being famous in rock and roll. So it was kind of a great thing to be born into, and to be in San Francisco in the height of the Haight-Ashbury and the hippies. At 10 years old, I was 10 years old in 1965. So all of a sudden, the girls came with see-through shirts, no bras. It's like I was 10 years old. I didn't know why my body was reacting, but I know that I wanted to go up there and look and hang out on Haight Street. So yeah. So it was like, didn't have to look at my mom's Cosmo Tales all or Playboy magazine, because you could just go up on Haight Street and you could see everything right there. You know, it was amazing. And before Haight-Ashbury, that was a quiet Catholic neighborhood. You know, I went to St. Agnes. You know, it was really a quiet neighborhood. You could go to the store and sign for stuff. You know, it was like the old days. And your grandmother would come pay the bill on the weekends. You know, so it was pretty cool. So it was a great introduction to music. I never wanted to do anything else, but I wanted to play pro football. That's probably, but I wasn't big enough. And back then, they didn't draft guys 5'9". They wouldn't even, you know, look at them. You know, but you know, my life hasn't turned out so bad.
Did you play football in high school and college?
Yeah, yes, I did. But I got offered a job in the first year that I went to college. I got offered a job with Dr. John, and so I was 18, right? So I had a choice: play a job, you know, with some friends. Ronnie Barron was the keyboard player, and he said, "Hey Tony, do you want to come audition for Dr. John?" I was like, "Yeah," you know, and it was my first job away from my dad, and it was pretty cool. Yeah. So I played with Dr. John when he had that song. I was in the right place, but it must have been the wrong time. 300 a week when I was 18 years old was a lot of money.
Wow. Okay, I got a question for you. You mentioned high school. One of the things I thought was interesting was that Johnny was in your dad's high school band. Did you meet Johnny?
Yeah, and but I'll keep this really short. So I went to Washington High School, same high school as Johnny Mathis, right? So there was a restaurant that we all hung out at called Knutsen's, which was down on Clement Street. And we all, like, if we cut class, that's where we went, to Knutsen's, right? So one day I cut class and I was hanging out, and this older guy was coming from, there used to be a Safeway right across from Knutsen. This older guy was struggling with his bags, and so I went across the street and I helped him. I pushed his cart to his house, right? And when I went in his house, I looked up on the wall, and there was a picture of my dad and Johnny Mathis, and I'm going like, wow, that's my dad. And the guy went, "You're Merl's son?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my dad." And he said, "I'm Johnny's dad." So I had met Johnny's dad, didn't know it. You know what I mean? I had helped him, you know, and then yes, of course, my dad was the first person ever to hire Johnny Mathis in a band. And Johnny, we went down and recorded with him one time at A&M Studios in LA. We recorded we spent a day recording with them. It was absolutely awesome. And he recorded a song, it was a Chris Hayes song, Chris Hayes and my dad's song. He recorded one of my dad's songs, one of Chris Hayes' songs, and it was pretty good. It was a great day. It was a great day to be around him, his atmosphere. Be at A&M Studios. I got to see Charlie Chaplin's footprints. You know what I mean? His foot was as big as my hand. You know, so you know, and Johnny came up and spoke at my dad's memorial service, and you know, he had nothing but nice things to say. I have a picture in my office of my dad sitting in the car with it's my dad, my mom, Johnny, and then the bass player sitting in the back, you know, and the sax player sitting in the back. They were on their way to a gig, but they were a really good band. They won a Band of the Year in San Francisco, and they got when they won, they got to play with Lionel Hampton. So I got a picture of my dad playing with Lionel Hampton and Johnny, you know, from back when they were teenagers. And so you must know this about Johnny. Johnny still holds the record for the long jump, and I think the long jump at my high school, because he could have been a professional long jumper. He could have went to the Olympics, or he could have been a singer. He had that choice. You know what I mean? But he still has the record at my high school for the long jump, and you know, it's well over 20 feet. You know, so he was really good at that.
Wow.
He was really good at track. And he was nice. I mean, when I met him, he was the super nice guy. You know, of course I knew who he was, and you know, it was pretty cool.
That's a great story. That's awesome. Let me ask you one thing I want to get to. you play your own music. You also play a bunch of the Dead stuff. I'm noticing that the clubs and the theaters are full of tribute bands, cover bands. Do you think, and some of the comments tell me that all people want to go see is stuff they already know. Do you think there's room for music for new people, or is the crowd?
It's really tough because people want familiarity, especially in music. I always record a cover song on my smooth jazz stuff. You know what I mean? And I've been playing the music of my dad and Jerry since I was 14 years old. I'm 57 now, and people know if I change anything on those songs. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest one of the highest paid bands in the Bay Area is Pride and Joy. And they don't do nothing but play. They play Motown covers. You know what I'm saying? And so people like familiarity. And I tried to play on my new album. I covered a Whitney Houston song. But I don't mind that. I just remember what my dad was striving for. My dad and Jerry, they always were reaching for it. They weren't just playing the cover song. They were playing the cover song, but then they were adding themselves into it. So with Keystone Revisited, I like add stuff into it. And it's really funny because on my jazz gig, I have one friend, he's like one of my best friends, and he knows and he likes both musics, right? He likes Tony's jazz and Tony playing the Dead stuff. So in the middle of a solo, while I'm playing the jazz stuff, I'll go into Jimi Hendrix lick, right? And only he'll know. The jazz people, they're just sitting there. They won't know it. But my friend is like cracking up because his name is Paul. Paul is cracking up because he knows that I'm just playing a Jimi Hendrix lick, to one of his songs and mixing it in. So I like to reach for it because that's what I was taught at the beginning. I wish people would come to see more original music, and they do. They come out and place big money to see the smooth jazz stuff and to see all the Dave Causes, the Brian Culbertson, Gerald Albright. They pay big money, and those guys make big money. The group Foreplay. I mean, that's 50 grand for one show. Yeah. To see them, to pay for them. So it's good money. I'm just glad that people come to see me, and I'm glad that they appreciate the new music as well as the old music. But I don't forget to play the old music too, because people want familiarity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
People always ask me, well, what did you learn from Jerry? And my dad, I learned to reach for it. Don't just be status quo. You know what I mean? I have a tough time when people copy people's music. So, like, they have all those Grateful Dead tribute bands, and they'll say, we're playing September 11th, 1967. What if they were having a bad night that night? And you're copying it and putting it into your vocabulary of music like it was the greatest thing on earth. So therefore, I'm always reaching for it. You know what I mean? So, and because one time, so I used to stand always by my dad. So since I could play I went to the conservatory before I played bass. I played piano, and so I would stand by my dad's left hand and watch. If I got lost, I just look at his left hand and I know where to go. Okay. But there was this one time I had to stand on the other side of the stage where the bass player usually stood, John Kahn, and we played this song, Pennies from Heaven. I didn't know it. No, I made mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, and so at the end of the song, I said, Jerry, I'm really sorry. I just didn't know that song, and I'm not standing by my dad, so I couldn't look at his left hand. He said, don't worry about it. We'll play another song now, and you'll be great. So I took that, where I was like so embarrassed that I made so many mistakes, and I think it's on YouTube too. It's like, oh, man. You know what I mean? I'm just making mistake after mistake. But then, for him to just tell me, there's another song to play and you got to be good on this one. You know what I mean? I know that you'll be better on this one because I know you know this song. And then we played a song that I knew, and, I killed it. And, and I'm still here and able to talk about stuff.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, you mentioned the Keystone. One of my favorite memories with my dad is he, me, Joel Sullivan, and one of the guys who owned Well Valentine's Day. We shared a birthday, and for a few years we got to have a party at one of the Keystones, and your dad would be there. Sometimes Sullivan would show up, and there'd be a jam because your dad always hosted the best jams. And some of my favorite birthdays were the ones I got to share with your dad.
Hey, that's cool. So, Bob, your birthday is Valentine's Day too?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's way cool. And one of my grandson's birthdays is Valentine's Day. You, Bob, Freddie Herrera, Joel Selvin, that's pretty cool. And my dad, it's pretty cool that you guys all have that Valentine's Day birthday. Yeah, the parties on Valentine's Day were really special. We're actually going to Keystone Revisit is going to Colorado February 8th and play a special Valentine's Day show in Colorado, in Buena Vista, Colorado. And I'm really excited to do that and to play that music.
I couldn't remember if it was Bobby Corona or Freddie Herrera.
No, it's Freddie Herrera. Freddie Herrera. Yeah, Freddie Herrera. And you know what's really funny about that? Freddie Herrera and my dad, they both have sons. Freddie had a son my age, you know what I mean? And Joel, I've known since I was a young kid, you know what I mean? So it's pretty ironic that all of these people, all you guys would get together and celebrate birthday. That's pretty awesome.
It was great when we discovered that. Well, we got a party together, So. Mark?
Yeah,
I'm leaving you out
that's
here.
pretty awesome.
No, I'm just worried because every time I talk, I get that echo chamber thing going. I don't know how my audio's, if it's playing properly, but Tony, I noticed on Facebook
I can hear you.
You have a show 5 p.m., the Tony Sanders show. Do you want to promote that?
Which show is that? Oh, my radio show?
Yeah. You have it
Oh yeah,
on your Facebook page.
So I have a Spotify channel. I have a Pandora channel, Tony Saunders Radio, and then I also have my own show, which is on Worldwide Jazz Radio, all jazz, all the time. You can see the Tony Saunders Show every Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. New York time. So it's really a good show. I play some of the music that I like, and I play a lot of Tony Saunders music. But it's Worldwide Jazz Radio, all jazz all the time. WorldwideJazzRadio.com. And every day at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Go ahead, Mark.
Do you remember Jazzbo from K-Jazz?
Oh, yeah.
I used to work at a restaurant. He was in there pretty much every morning in his overall suit that he wore and everything. One of the sweetest, nicest people I've ever come across. But I had another question for you. I saw on your Facebook page, and I'm guessing it's an article about your father, the Prince kind of yellow on it. But off to the right of it, it says Trident Management. So was that Frank Werber of the Trident in Sausalito? Because I believe he was Trident Management. I used to work at the Trident.
Yeah, my dad played there every Sunday afternoon.
At the Trident?
At the Trident.
Wow.
Just a young kid. And we go there, hear music. And, I met Al Jarreau there when I was young, because Al Jarreau was there. And then it was funny because later, my dad, when he was in his 60s, he played there again. But we used to go there every Sunday afternoon. He would play, and that's after he played the jam session in the morning at Jack's, which was from 6 to 10. Then go to church, and then he'd go to the Trident. It's pretty amazing. My dad and his stamina, I'll never be able to compete with that, because the reason why I didn't play with him all the time was because he toured too much. And I had kids, and I wanted to be with my kids. And, up until when he got sick, he had a stroke he was still doing like 100 and something days, 160 days on the road, you know, and he was in his 70s. And I was like, whoa. But luckily, he hired me to play on all his records. He thought I was good enough to do that. And whenever I needed a job, if I really called him and said, "Dad, I don't have no work," he would say, "Okay, come back to the group." You know,
That's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
I knew all the bass players he hired, you know, and so they knew that they were, if I wanted to come back, that my dad would let me come back. So we always stayed on a friendly thing. But my dad, you know, what a way to introduce your kid. You know, I remember riding in the back of a van on the organ. I got his organ sitting right here, but I would ride on the organ up to Lake Tahoe because we'd be crammed in there. All the musicians would be there, and I'm like laying on the organ underneath by where the organ pedals go. You know, not looking out the window. I'm just lying there waiting for 3.5 hours till we get from San Francisco to Tahoe. But those are some of the most precious times. You know, I got to talk about guitar players. He had this guy named Junius Simmons playing with them. Spectacular. You know, John Bishop, this guy from Chicago, he showed me some stuff on bass too. You know, John White, who was the first guy who ever showed me something on bass, he was a guitar player with my dad. These guys were all incredible musicians, and I got to be around them. I had a radio show on Sly Stone's show.
Wow.
And when Sly Stone was on KDIA, because Sly Stone would come to my dad and say, "Merl, what do you think I should do? You know, I'm starting to get famous in the music. Do you think I should go and play with my group?" And my dad was like, "Yes." You know, because it's funny, because as much as we know Sly Stone, they were at the top for only 2.5 years.
But their music still resonates, and some of them are iconic pieces of the American culture now.
That's great. Yep, that's true.
I had a question about your dad's organ sitting next to you. Is that the same organ they made you climb up the stairs with?
Yeah. I had to move that organ. Yes, I moved it all my childhood. That's how I moved his organ, Jimmy Smith's organ, Richard Groove Holmes' organ, all up these steps at these clubs in San Francisco. And it was before the dolly. You know, so you just had to and hold it. You know, now they have dollies on them, so it's easy. You can lift it up and put it down. But back then, you just had to grab it. And there was this club in San Francisco called the Upper Room. Downstairs was the playpen, and upstairs was the upper room when you made it, and it was 300 people. So all of those guys played in the upper room. And Jimmy Smith was like one of my play godfathers, and Jimmy Smith would always like mess with me. Sly Stone, just once, Sly Stone, while I remember this, gave me an organ when I was 10 years old because I was playing. They all thought I was going to be a keyboard player.
And you got your bass guitar from John Fogerty's brother.
Tom Fogerty.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Fogerty gave me my first Fender bass. Yeah, and you know, so I've been around royalty all my life. You know, of course, when I started getting serious about music, the first thing that I ever played on won an Emmy. It was this piece called "Soul Is," which I did with my dad. My dad told me exactly what to play, and it won an Emmy. It was a PBS special about the kids in Oakland, grammar school. They were young kids, and they were doing poetry, little black kids doing poetry. It was called Soul Is. And then I didn't win another Emmy until about 5 years ago, when I won one for the TV series Digital Journey. And, you know, so being on the edge of this stuff, you know, with my dad showed me so much stuff. Everything that I know how to do is because of my dad. I'm just a little bit faster because I'm the next generation. And so my greatest thing was, I'm lying in bed one Thursday or Friday morning, and my dad calls me and goes, I say, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" And he says, "Hey, Tony, I got a favor to ask you." I said, "What?" He said, "I need you to produce me." I'm going like, "For real?" You know, and so my dad, I produced one of his solo records, Meridian Dreams. And the toughest thing was, I'm sitting there in Fantasy Studios, my dad plays the hell out of this thing, and I'm going like, I didn't feel the emotion from it. And I go, "Can you do that one more time, Dad?" I just, for me, you know what I'm saying? Because I just didn't feel it. And he did it one more time, and that track was, he loved it and I loved it. It was great. But my dad called me to produce them, that means that I had approval. You know what I mean? And then we wrote a song together called "The Grass Is Greener." Yeah, The Grass Is Greener, and he had me add a section to it, and I have it on record. Mavis Staples and my dad sang it, and you know, I remember him recording Mavis in Chicago, and he was like so excited. He called me, "Hey Tony, Mavis just sang. Listen to our song." You know, those kind of moments. You know, I could never. What can I say? You know, my dad showed me the world. You know what I'm saying? And luckily, I practiced and I was able to play music.
No, that's amazing.
It's a beautiful story. Your family story is incredible, and what can we look forward to with the Tony Saunders story?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you one other thing about my dad that you don't know.
Okay.
My dad had a record company with Wilt Chamberlain.
Holy mackerel!
When the Philadelphia Warriors moved from Philadelphia to San Francisco, my dad was Wilt's best friend because we were out at the club. So we would keep his Bentley whenever he go on the road, and you know, I can tell you that me and my dad beat Wilt and my brother in a basketball game.
No way! No way!
In my backyard. Of course, Wilt let us win. You know what I'm saying? But I would play basketball with him. We'd be out in front of my house playing football with Wilt. You know what I'm saying? And you know, just the nicest guy. The true epitome was that when we moved to LA with my mom, when my parents split up, we are going to watch the Lakers at the Forum, right? And so my friends are going, yeah, Tony, you know Wilt, get us in free. You know, I'll do this, blah, blah, blah. So none of that happened, right? But we all went there to see the Lakers, and we all had a great time. And they forgot about it because we had such a good time, right? So we're walking back across the parking lot, and we're walking to the bus stop, and I hear, "Hey, Tony," because Wilt stuttered. "Hey, Tony." And so he noticed me by the back of my head. And so he drove up next to me and he said, "Hey, do you want to ride home? I'll give you a ride home." I said, "Well, I got my friends with me, and I got to hang with them because we can't all fit in your car." But then he said, "Hey, tell your mom I'm going to come by on Wednesday because he loved my mom's pies. And so I'm going to tell her I'm going to come get a pie on Wednesday." So all of my friends are standing there like, we were sitting there fooling around, and then Wilt drives up, noticing me by the back of my head, and he said, "Hey, well, you got the number, right?" I said, "Yeah." "You got the same number, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, my number's not changed." And he goes, "Okay, I'll see you guys on Wednesday." And he drove off. My friends were like,
yeah, no kidding.
Being the new kid at the school, you know what I mean? And telling this, I know Wilt Chamberlain, you know what I mean? And then he drives up. So at school Monday, everybody knew that Tony really does know Wilt Chamberlain. He knows him really good. Wilt called him by his first name, and he drove across the parking lot to catch up with Tony. And he said he could have went the other direction. And they said, Tony really knows him. So it was like, that was my first year at the school, Mount Vernon Junior High School, and it was my first year there. So it made me an instant celebrity. Yeah. It was cool. It made the girls like me and everything. It was way cool.
No,
you know what I'm saying? So that was one of the fun things. That kind of stuff happened to me my whole life.
Wow. So, with all the amazing stuff in your bio, I have to thank you for actually mentioning in your bio that you were a music director on Rock Justice.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That was a lot of fun. We got to find that song. I'm still looking for that song because I know it'd be relevant today. No, Rock Justice, that was a lot of fun because we had a lot of fun doing that. It was in the theater that I had been in as a kid, watching Oscar Brown Jr. do his plays. And then my dad worked around the corner doing Big Time Buck White. So it was like, it meant a lot to me. And plus, Keita Bill is one of my favorite singers ever. You know what I mean? And so getting to meet all those people. Remember the trouble we had with Rick Derringer?
Oh my God! Yes, yeah.
Tell me.
Well, the our girl lead singer who played Miss Justice wound up marrying Rick Derringer, and at one point he was going to be in the show, then he wasn't going to be in the show.
Well, that's showbiz.
Yep.
he came out. I think he hung with us for a few days. It was cool.
Yeah, that he did. Okay, well, we got about a minute and time's left, so basically, I want to thank you for this incredible interview. Your life is amazing. I mean, you've been for a long time, and I didn't know half of the stories. Is there anything you want to just mention at the end? Do you want to plug that you're doing in the future, or anything else?
Just that I'm easily accessible. You can go to my website, which is tonysaunders.com. And if you hit me up and want to talk to me, I'll talk to you. You know, I'm usually really accessible, and I like to help kids. I've done a lot of stuff with kids. One thing that you don't know, I coach football. I coached high school football at Tam High for 4 years, and and I coached 1 year at San Rafael High, where I replaced the coach there that was legendary. His son played on the Chicago Bears, Brad Muster, and I replaced his dad at San Rafael High. And I coached at Tam for 5 years, you know, and I love Little League. Little League, I coached the baseball team after the police chief. God, I can't remember his name right now, but I coached his kids, you know, just so many things. I'm Mr. Community. I want to do that. And plus I love to play music. So if nothing else, I'm easily accessible. My phone number's on my website. You can call me. And if it's about stuff that I like, I'll do it. And thank you guys for interviewing me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. It's been incredible. Thank you for your time.
Great stories.
No problem.
You.